When my mom bought her house, I remember the look on her face like it was yesterday. It was the first time in years I'd seen her truly smile. After everything she'd been through, raising me on her own, working 2 jobs, putting up with crappy landlords and noisy neighbors, this little house in a quiet neighborhood was supposed to be her reward. A peaceful, cozy place where she could finally breathe. The community seemed perfect on paper. Tree-lined streets, friendly-looking people waving as you drove by, even a little neighborhood park with a bench she used to read on. It was the kind of place she'd always dreamed of living. And yeah, there was an HOA, but the realtor brushed it off. Just a small, organized board to help keep the place nice. That's what they always say. At first, things were fine. My mom planted a few flowers out front. She'd sit on the porch with her tea in the mornings. She baked cookies for neighbors during the holidays. That's just who she is. She wasn't trying to stand out or break rules, she was just trying to live. Then the letters started coming. The first one was about her trash can being left out, too long, after pickup. It had been out for maybe an hour past the collection time. She laughed it off at first. "I guess they're really on top of things here," she said, half joking. But it wasn't a joke for long. The next week, she got cited for her front lawn. Not because it was unkempt. Oh no, my mom's lawn was always neatly trimmed. It was the shade of green. They said it didn't match the community standard, and accused her of using a type of grass seed that wasn't approved. What does that even mean? Then came the issue with her curtains. Yeah, you heard me, curtains. Apparently the board didn't like that her second-floor curtains were a non-neutral tone. They were light blue. Not neon. Not flashy. Just a soft pastel blue that, somehow, offended the HOA gods. Every week it was something new. One day, it was her mailbox being a 1/4 inch too high. Another day, it was a decorative flag she hung on the porch that they claimed violated some obscure rule in their 60-page handbook. It started weighing on her. I could see it. The sparkle that came with the house, the peace she thought she'd finally found, was getting dimmer by the day. She stopped gardening. She stayed inside more. She cried sometimes when she thought I couldn't hear. And what broke me the most was how she kept trying to be nice about it. "I don't want to cause trouble," she'd say. "Maybe they're just doing their job." But this wasn't just a job. This was targeted. I didn't want to believe it at first, but when I dug around and found out that none of the other homes were being nitpicked like hers, it became obvious. Some of the neighbors had literal junk in their yards. Some had fences falling apart, or driveways covered in oil stains. But those homes? Not a single citation. So why her? She was quiet. She was kind. She wasn't part of the little HOA clique, and she wasn't the type to show up at meetings and rub elbows. And maybe that made her an easy target. But here's the thing they didn't realize, she's my mom. And I don't let anyone mess with her. I started attending the HOA meetings myself. Not as a board member, just as a resident. I sat quietly in the back and watched. And what I saw made my blood boil. The board president, let's call him Greg, ran the meetings like a petty little king. He dismissed concerns from actual residents, but he and his inner circle would spend 20 minutes arguing over someone's garden gnome or the shade of beige on a garage door. Everything was about control. About appearances. And it was clear they got some sick satisfaction from making people jump through hoops. And when someone like my mom, someone who didn't push back, got caught in their sights, they made an example out of her. That's when I knew this wasn't just about bad luck or misunderstanding. This was bullying. The same kind I used to deal with in school, just wearing polos and holding clipboards now. And just like I did back then, I decided I wasn't going to let it slide. I started helping my mom write formal letters in response to every violation. I researched the HOA bylaws, found inconsistencies, and called them out on it, on record. I made sure everything was documented, every meeting attended. And the more I showed up, the more I noticed others, quiet neighbors like my mom, starting to come to meetings too. Turns out, she wasn't the only one being pushed around. But no one had ever fought back. That was about to change. I knew I couldn't undo the stress they'd already caused her. But I could stop it from continuing. And maybe, just maybe, I could make sure no one else's mom had to go through what mine did. That's when the idea hit me, something I never thought I'd do in a million years. I was going to run for the HOA board. And not just as a member. I was going to be the next president. If you thought the trash can and curtain nonsense was where it ended, oh man, you'd be underestimating the HOA's true talent, weaponizing pettiness. After I started paying closer attention, I noticed their letters were arriving more frequently, sometimes twice a week. Each one stuffed with a thinly veiled threat, citations, or a friendly reminder that read more like a warning from a loan shark. It wasn't about community standards. It was about power. They weren't just enforcing rules, they were targeting her. It was like every time my mom took a step to enjoy her home, they were right there to slap her wrists like she was some kind of child misbehaving. I remember walking into her house one afternoon and finding her sitting at the kitchen table, just staring at a letter. She didn't even look up when I walked in. She just slid the paper across the table toward me. They fined her for having overgrown shrubs. Mind you, these were the same hedges that had been trimmed literally 5 days earlier. I checked the photo they attached, trying to find the issue, but the shrubs looked perfect. Neatly shaped. Not a single stray branch. What were they even seeing? They said they measured it, my mom said quietly. And it was 2 inches past the height limit. 2 inches. I tried to laugh it off, but my jaw was clenched. Who goes around measuring shrub height with a tape measure? Did one of them walk onto her property to do that? That's when I realized this wasn't passive anymore. They were actively monitoring her. Another time, she got cited because her car was parked too far to the left. In her driveway. Not the street. Her own driveway. They claimed the left tire was over the invisible alignment standard that all driveways in the neighborhood were expected to maintain. I looked it up in the bylaws. No such rule existed. Just another made-up offense from the HOA's fantasy land. Then came the deadliest move in their arsenal, selective enforcement. I drove around the neighborhood just to confirm I wasn't losing it. There were houses with peeling paint, broken blinds, garden gnomes wearing sunglasses, flamingos, string lights, violations everywhere. And yet none of them had letters on their doors. No citations. No threats of fines. No mention at meetings. Just my mom. I asked her if she ever spoke up at the HOA meetings. She looked down and shook her head. I don't want to make them angry. That crushed me. Here was the strongest person I know, the woman who held it together through layoffs, eviction notices, and raising a stubborn kid, me, and this group of suburban control freaks had her scared into silence. It made me wonder how many other people in the neighborhood were living the same way. Staying quiet. Paying fines they couldn't afford. Apologizing for things they didn't do wrong. All just to avoid being on the list. So I started asking questions. I knocked on doors. I introduced myself to neighbors. Some were polite but distant. Others opened up instantly, like they'd been waiting for someone to listen. Turns out, my mom wasn't the only one. There was a young couple fined for using a baby gate on their front porch. An elderly man cited 3 times for having too many potted plants. A single dad who got a violation notice because his kid left a basketball hoop up for the weekend. Every story had the same pattern, small, harmless things, that somehow triggered the wrath of the board. You know what all these people had in common? They weren't part of the HOA president's crew. Yep. The inner circle. The board members and their loyal followers. People who never got letters. People who somehow always had exemptions. People who sat in the front row at meetings and clapped at everything Greg said like it was gospel. Greg. Let's talk about him for a second. Greg was the kind of guy who called himself a leader, but had never led anything beyond a bake sale. Power had gone straight to his head. He wore HOA-branded polos like they were a military uniform. He referred to himself as The steward of the community. And he loved reminding everyone about the rules, especially when he wasn't the one following them. I caught him once leaving his trash cans out overnight. Twice. Did he get a warning? Of course not. I even took a photo and submitted it anonymously. Nothing. Meanwhile, my mom got another fine, this time because the shade of mulch she used in her flower bed was not in the approved color palette. Mulch. I don't know how she stayed calm. I really don't. But one night, I found her quietly tearing up a violation letter in the kitchen. She didn't say anything. Just smiled through it and said, "Maybe I should just move." That was it for me. They weren't just making her life miserable, they were trying to push her out. And for what? So Greg and his cronies could have a picture-perfect HOA-controlled community where nobody colored outside the lines. No way. I stayed up that night digging through everything I could find: HOA bylaws, election rules, minutes from the last 2 years of meetings. I found out when the next board election was. I read every single nomination requirement. And I made a decision. No more complaints. No more letters. No more silence. If the board wanted control so badly, I'd take it from them. Not through yelling, not through lawsuits, through their own system. I wasn't just going to run for the board. I was going to beat them at their own game. For every dead flower, every fake rule, every time they made my mom feel small, I was going to make them regret it. Because they didn't realize the quiet woman they were bullying? She raised someone who doesn't back down. The day I decided to run for the HOA board, I didn't feel brave. I felt angry. Furious, honestly. But beneath all that fire was something else: clarity. I knew exactly what I had to do. No more watching from the sidelines. No more letting a bunch of suburban tyrants bully my mom like she was some kind of outsider in her own home. I was done being polite. It was time to get strategic. First step? Learn their game inside and out. I read our HOA bylaws like they were scripture. Highlighted, bookmarked, took notes. Turns out, the election process was surprisingly open. Any resident in good standing could run, as long as they submitted their name before the nomination deadline. And guess what? That deadline was just 3 weeks away. Perfect. Now, I wasn't naive. I knew the board wasn't going to just welcome me in with open arms. Greg, especially, was going to hate every second of it. I could already imagine his smug little smile twitching the moment he heard my name on the ballot. But that only motivated me more. I didn't want revenge. I wanted change. I started building support quietly. I went door to door, just like when I asked about their experiences with the HOA, and this time, I told them what I was planning. At first, people were skeptical. Some even laughed. They'd seen people try before. Good people. And the board always shut them down, using technicalities or scare tactics, or just flat out slandering them at meetings. But then I told them my why. I told them about my mom. About the mulch letter. About the 2-inch shrub. About how she cried in the kitchen over a driveway violation. I didn't sugarcoat anything. I wanted people to feel what I felt. And a lot of them did. Turns out, the HOA had made enemies all over the neighborhood. Some people were just quiet about it. Others had tried to speak up and been shut down. But when they realized I wasn't afraid of Greg or the board or their army of lawn-obsessed lackeys, they started to get on board. Literally. I collected signatures. I had to get 25 to officially appear on the ballot. I got 42. And with every new person who signed, I heard more stories. More frustration. More quiet rage. One guy said the HOA fined him for leaving his garage door open too long while unloading groceries. Another got hit with a noise violation because his dog barked at a squirrel. It was ridiculous. Like living under a dictatorship run by the world's pettiest hall monitors. But now, change was on the ballot. And my name was attached to it. The next HOA meeting was the first time I showed my hand publicly. I walked in, clean-shaven, collared shirt, calm face. But inside? I was on fire. Greg was up front, running the show as always, acting like a suburban king. His little army of nodders sat around him like a fan club, nodding at every sentence like it was profound wisdom. I waited until the open forum portion, then stood up. Hi, I'm your name. I've been a resident here for over a decade. Some of you know me. Many of you know my mom. Heads started turning. I'm announcing my candidacy for the HOA board today. Not because I want power, but because I'm tired of watching this board bully my family and my neighbors. Greg's face. You should have seen it. His lips curled like he just bit into a lemon. The nodders all went stiff, unsure how to react. I kept going. I've spoken to dozens of residents. I've heard your stories. I've read the rules. I know what's been going on here. And I think it's time this board answered to the people it claims to represent. Silence. Then a few claps. Then a few more. Greg tried to pivot, of course. He cleared his throat and gave one of his classic, "Thank you for your comment, we appreciate all participation" responses. You know the kind, condescending but legally safe. But the energy in the room had shifted. People were looking at me differently. With hope. The next few weeks were campaign mode. I didn't have flashy posters or ads, but I had something better: truth. I walked the neighborhood every evening, talking to people. I posted on the community message board, politely but firmly calling out the board's nonsense. I even made a flyer that said, "Tired of fines for mulch color and mailbox placement? So am I. Let's bring back sanity." I didn't promise miracles. I promised accountability. Greg started fighting back, of course. He tried to paint me as inexperienced and disruptive. His loyalists started spreading rumors, like I wanted to remove all HOA rules entirely. I didn't, or that I had a personal vendetta. Okay, that one wasn't entirely false. But I stayed calm. I wasn't playing dirty. I didn't need to. Because I had something Greg didn't, the truth on my side. And the more he panicked, the more obvious it became to everyone that this board wasn't about protecting the community. It was about control. Personal control. Petty power trips disguised as policy. Election night finally came. It was held in the community center, packed wall to wall. People I'd never even met came out just to vote. I stood near the back with my mom, who had never looked prouder. She squeezed my hand and said, "No matter what happens, I'm proud of you." I smiled and said, "We're taking it back." The vote was simple: paper ballots, cast in person. 3 open seats, 5 candidates, including me and Greg. When the results were finally announced, I held my breath. I won. So did 2 other new candidates, people I'd spoken with, who shared the same goal, making the HOA about the people again. Greg? He came in fourth. His face as he walked out of that meeting. I'll never forget it. But more important than his expression was what it meant: the reign of fear was over. I was on the board now. And I had work to do. You'd think that winning the election would have been the big victory. But honestly, that was just the start. I wasn't interested in a title. I wasn't here to sit in meetings and nod along. I got elected to shake things up, and on day 1 as HOA president, I came in like a wrecking ball, polite, calculated, but a wrecking ball nonetheless. The first meeting I chaired was already different. For one, the room was packed. Not just the usual board members and a couple grumpy regulars, actual residents. People were watching. The energy was electric, and all eyes were on me. Greg sat off to the side, arms crossed, looking like he'd swallowed a lemon. He wasn't president anymore, just a board member. But don't get it twisted, the man was still scheming. I could feel it. But I wasn't worried about Greg. I was focused on fixing what he broke. The agenda for that night? Oh, it was loaded. I started by addressing the elephant in the room. "Before we move into business," I said, voice calm but firm, "I want to talk about what kind of board we're going to be from now on." People leaned in. "We're not going to bully people. We're not going to nitpick lawns or harass folks about paint colors or mulch. We're going to be fair, transparent, and actually serve this community, not control it. A few people clapped. I saw my mom in the back, quietly smiling. And that starts with some policy changes. I had done my homework. I wasn't just making noise, I had actual proposals ready to go. First, I motioned to suspend enforcement of non-structural aesthetic violations, things like lawn ornament sizes, flower colors, or how long your trash bins were on the curb. That stuff had been weaponized for years, and it had to stop. Second, I proposed a full review of all existing fines issued in the past 2 years. Any that were unreasonable or issued without due process would be voided, no questions asked. Third, and this one got a few gasps, I moved to form an independent community advisory group made up of residents not on the board. Their job? Oversight. Transparency. A watchdog to keep us in check. And yeah, I knew that was bold. Most HOA boards would never allow it. But this wasn't most boards. And I wasn't most presidents. Greg tried to push back, of course. He raised his hand, barely containing his sarcasm. With all due respect, he said, this isn't a high school student council. You can't just come in and change everything overnight. I looked him dead in the eye. I'm not changing everything. Just the things you and your friends turned into a weapon. That shut him up for a second. But then another board member, one of the new ones, backed me up. Then another. Suddenly, it wasn't just me. The tide had turned. The votes passed, all 3 proposals. Unanimously. The room exploded in applause. People were cheering. One older guy in a Vietnam vet hat came up to me after and said, "You don't know how long we've waited for this." But I wasn't done. Over the next week, I dug deeper into the HOA records. And what I found? Infuriating. Greg and his cronies had buried people in fines for things like too many lawn chairs, plants growing over a sidewalk by 2 inches, or garage sale signs placed incorrectly. One single mom had been fined 8 times for her kid's basketball hoop being too visible. Worse, they'd racked up enough of these that the HOA had threatened liens against several homeowners. All over petty nonsense. I called for a special emergency meeting. Greg didn't even show up. But the rest of us did. We voted to nullify every lien that had been filed under those ridiculous violations. I had legal review lined up to back it all up. We weren't breaking rules, we were correcting abuse. And that's when it started happening. People began coming out of their shells. One woman who hadn't shown her face at a meeting in 5 years came and thanked us. Another man offered to help repaint community signs for free, just to pitch in. A couple of teens asked if they could build a little free library box in the park, and instead of hitting them with permits and forms, we just said yes. The neighborhood was coming back to life. But of course, Greg wasn't done. He tried to rally the old board members, even started circulating a petition to recall me. But guess what? No one signed it. Not even his usual supporters. Because they could see what was happening. People liked the new energy. The freedom. The best part? One day, I got a knock on my door. It was the same HOA enforcer who used to take pictures of my mom's flower beds and send us warnings. Only now she looked nervous. "I wanted to apologize," she said. "I was just doing what Greg told me. I didn't feel good about it." I didn't gloat. I just nodded and said, "We're doing things differently now." She smiled, then offered to help with the community garden project we just started. That's when I knew we weren't just fixing policies. We were fixing trust. But I'll be honest, not everything was easy. There were moments I wanted to quit. Late nights reading legal docs. Nasty emails from old board loyalists. People telling me I was too young, too emotional, too unqualified. But then I'd remember why I started. My mom. Her quiet strength. The way she stood there, holding back tears over a mulch fine, still refusing to let them break her. She was my why. And now, every time she walks outside, she does it with her head high. Her garden? Blooming. Her yard? Full of color. No more threats. No more fear. Because we took our power back. And this is just the beginning. They say revenge is a dish best served cold. But what I learned? Justice, real justice, tastes even better when it's earned, slow cooked over time, and shared with the people who suffered the most. I didn't become HOA president to get revenge. Not really. But I'd be lying if I said I didn't feel something deeply satisfying when I got the news. Greg had sold his house. Gone. Packed up. Moving trucks out front. For sale, sign yanked up, replaced with a sold sticker. Just like that, the man who had made my mom's life miserable for over a year was leaving. And not quietly either. Apparently, he couldn't handle the fact that his little kingdom had fallen. His complaints were legendary. The new board is too soft, this community's going downhill, nobody enforces the rules anymore. No, Greg. People are just finally happy. He lost control, and with it, his power. I found out from one of the neighbors, Mr. Burns, 2 doors down, who called me up chuckling. Guess who's packing up a U-Haul like a man with no friends? He said. I couldn't help but smile. Greg? Bingo. Word is, he's moving to some gated community on the other side of town. Of course he was. Gotta find somewhere else to rule over people who didn't ask for it. I didn't say anything to him personally. I didn't need to. But I did walk past his place that day. Not to gloat, just to witness it. Just to make it real. He didn't look at me. Just kept barking orders at the movers. But for once, I wasn't the one who felt small. Later that afternoon, my mom was outside, tending her flower beds. Her hydrangeas had come in full bloom. She had this little blue pinwheel tucked into the mulch, something the old board would have flagged as unapproved decoration. But now, it just spun happily in the wind. I told her Greg was gone. She didn't jump. She didn't cheer. She just exhaled, long, slow, like she'd been holding that breath for months. And then she smiled. It wasn't a huge grin. It was something softer. But I'll never forget it. Because it was the first time I'd seen peace on her face in a long time. You did it, she said. I shook my head. We did it. She reached out and pulled me into a hug. I'm proud of you. That hit different. Not because I needed her validation, but because I knew I had turned something ugly into something that actually meant something. I didn't just push back. I changed the game. After Greg left, the community blossomed, literally and figuratively. Kids were playing outside more. People started talking again, waving across driveways, hosting block parties, starting book clubs and barbecue nights. The rigid silence that once hung over the neighborhood was gone, replaced by laughter, music, and actual life. The HOA board meetings? Full of people now. And not just complainers, folks who wanted to help. To build. To fix. To heal. We introduced things like a community beautification grant, small funds for people who wanted to plant flowers or clean up neglected lots. We hosted a spring picnic in the park and got a record turnout. People brought food, set up lawn games, and just enjoyed being neighbors again. And my mom? She became something of a neighborhood legend. People would walk by and say, "You're the mom, aren't you? The one who stood up to Greg?" She'd laugh and wave them off, but I knew it meant a lot to her. She even started leading a small gardening group, helping others design colorful, vibrant yards without worrying about being punished for it. It felt like the heart of the neighborhood had finally come back. But here's the thing no one tells you about winning: it doesn't fix everything. There are still disagreements. Still hard days. Still people who get a little too into everyone's business. But now, we handle it differently. With respect. With transparency. With actual care for each other. Because once you take down the bully, it's not enough to sit on their throne. You have to change the system they used to hurt people. And that's what I'm proud of. That, and the fact that my mom now plants whatever she wants, whenever she wants, and no one dares say a word about it. One morning, a couple of weeks after Greg moved out, We were sitting on the porch sipping coffee. Birds were chirping, the sun was warm, and a breeze rustled the wind chimes she'd always wanted to hang up. She looked out over the street and said, "You know, I was thinking of repainting the mailbox. Maybe something bright. Something fun." I grinned. "Go for it. You've earned it." And in that moment, everything felt worth it. The arguments. The tension. The endless late nights reading bylaws and organizing campaigns. The anxiety before every meeting. Because this wasn't just about my mom anymore. It was about every quiet homeowner who ever felt powerless. Every person who got bullied for planting a sunflower or leaving up a holiday decoration too long. Every resident who'd been made to feel small, just because someone else liked to play dictator. We didn't just take back the neighborhood. We reminded people that they belong in it. And as for me? I'm still HOA president. But not forever. Someday I'll step aside, pass the torch. And I hope when that day comes, the next person will remember the lesson I learned the hard way. It's not about control. It's about community.